My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and I found out what my family really thought of me from a hospital bed 6 weeks earlier. I had given birth to a daughter, Lily. Then a truck ran a red light on Colfax while I was driving home from a late shift. I woke up with 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a cast on my right arm. My husband, Michael, was in Seattle, 6 hours away from getting home. Someone had to care for my newborn that night. And my mother lived only 20 minutes from the hospital. She said no. She told Michael one sentence, and that sentence is the reason you're here. Your sister never has these emergencies. My sister was on a Caribbean cruise. My mother was sitting in a casino. What I did from that hospital bed over the next 3 minutes ended 9 years and $486,000. And that isn't even the part that broke them. The part that broke them walked through the door 3 hours later. An old man carrying a worn folder. And he said something none of them ever expected to hear out loud. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the channel where quiet people finally close the account. If someone in your life has ever treated your steadiness like a blank check, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me who actually showed up when you fell. And be sure to subscribe. I want to tell you about the phone call because that's where it starts. I came out of anesthesia in a curtained bay in the emergency room. The first thing I felt was the cast on my right arm, heavy and unfamiliar. And the plastic ID band tightened around my left wrist. A nurse was saying my name, like she'd already said it several times. My ribs felt like someone had parked a sedan on my chest. Michael was on speakerphone beside my head. His voice was doing that flat, careful thing it always did when he was scared, and trying not to sound scared. Emily, the sitter can't stay past 11. I called your mom. I knew before he said it. She won't come. There was a pause, and behind his words, I could hear it. Faint but unmistakable, the electronic chime of slot machines, the chatter of a casino floor, the little celebration sound a machine makes when it pays out. My mother was at Black Hawk with her friends. She told Michael she couldn't drive over because she had to cat sit while my sister, Ashley, was on a cruise. A cat. My 6-week-old daughter needed someone for the night, and the answer was a cat. I didn't cry. I want you to understand that part because everyone expects the woman in the hospital bed to fall apart. I didn't. I looked down at the band around my wrist. Then I reached over with my left hand and picked up my phone from the tray table. I had things to take care of. And I was very good at taking care of things. That had always been the problem. You should know who I was before that night, because it explains why my family treated me the way a faucet treats a glass. I grew up in a rented duplex in Aurora, where the heat worked only when it felt like it. I paid for community college by working closing shifts at a grocery store. Then I transferred on scholarship and clawed my way into a finance program that nobody in my family understood. By 30, I was a senior financial analyst at a Fortune 500 company downtown. I was the person they put in the room when the numbers absolutely had to be right. I read spreadsheets for a living. Numbers don't play favorites, and they don't lie to your face, which is more than I could say for some people. Michael and I married when I was 26 and decided to wait before having children. Partly because we wanted to, partly because there was always something my family needed first. We lived below our means, in a way nobody noticed. 2 incomes. one used car, no debt. That's the only reason what I'm about to tell you was even possible. For 9 years, I had been sending my parents $4,500 every month. I never said that number out loud. Not to my husband, not to my sister, not to anyone. I told myself it was for my father's heart condition and the mortgage. I told myself I was the only person steady enough to carry that responsibility. And being the steady one had become its own identity. I'm telling you this now so you'll understand. I wasn't naive. I was responsible to the point of self-erasure. There is a difference. And that night, I finally learned it. The first thing I did wasn't revenge. The first thing I did was solve the actual problem, because that's what I do, using my left thumb. I pulled up the number of a licensed overnight childcare agency Michael and I had vetted before Lily was born but never ended up using. A woman answered on the second ring. I told her my name, my situation, and my address in 9 calm sentences. I need a night nurse for a 6-week-old baby tonight, starting immediately. She asked if the baby was medically stable. She's perfect, I said. I'm the one in the hospital. 40 minutes later. A nurse named Jennifer Brooks let herself into our house using the code Michael provided. She washed her hands and texted me a picture of Lily asleep, with her tiny fist pressed against her cheek. I stared at that picture for a long time. The emergency room nurse beside me watched me set my phone down. Then she asked gently, "Do you have family who can come?" "It's handled," I replied. "Next." She blinked. People always blink when you don't perform the breakdown they're expecting. I wasn't being cold. I was triaging. The way you do when you've spent your whole life being the only adult in a room full of adults. My daughter was safe, warm, protected. My husband was on his way home. My ribs would heal. There was exactly one item left on my list that night. One thing I had carried for 9 years and never allowed myself to examine. Now my left hand was free, and my mind was very, very clear. I opened my banking app. The login screen glowed in the dark room like a small, cold moon. Inside the app, there was a page called Recurring Transfers. I had 4 of them. I knew each one by heart, the way you know a scar. The first was labeled Mom and Dad, $2,000 per month. The second, Home, $1,100 per month. Money for a mortgage I believed I was helping pay. The third, Dad Medical, $900. The fourth, Ashley Support, $500 every month. $4,500 for 108 months. I had set up the first transfer when I was 25, the night my father called me crying over a hospital bill, and I had never allowed myself to calculate the total, because the total felt like a door I could never walk back through. So I made myself look. The app did the math without hesitation, $486,000. Almost $500,000. Gone from my life. One quiet automated payment at a time. While my mother told relatives that they managed on their own, I pressed cancel on the first transfer. A green check mark appeared, along with a line of text I'll remember for the rest of my life. Recurring transfer canceled. I pressed the second. Recurring transfer canceled. The third, the fourth. 4 taps, maybe 20 seconds. And 9 years simply stopped, the way a faucet stops when someone finally turns the handle. I felt no triumph, no grief, only a strange, flat clarity, like the moment a spreadsheet finally balances. Then while closing the app, my eyes caught something buried in the transaction history. A single line item hidden beneath the dad medical category from 2 years earlier. Loan M, $40,000. M, my sister's initial, not my father's surgery. Ashley. I locked my phone and lay there in the dark, listening to the monitor count my heartbeats. And I finally forced myself to sit with the question I had avoided for 9 years. Why had I done it? The easy answer, the one strangers usually give, is that I was a pushover desperate for love. That answer is wrong, and if you've ever been the dependable one, you already know why. I did it because somewhere along the way I convinced myself that being needed was the same thing as being safe. If I was the load-bearing wall, no one could remove me. My grandmother understood that before I did. Her name was Margaret Sullivan, my mother's mother, a tall, flinty woman who always smelled like coffee and machine oil. A woman who never had to raise her voice to command a room's attention. The year before, she died. She took my hand at Thanksgiving and said, "Somebody has to watch this family's money. Your mother won't. So it will have to be you." At the time, I thought she meant be generous. Now I think she meant something much closer to be vigilant. Margaret Sullivan passed away quietly in her sleep last spring, and I had been so buried in a difficult pregnancy and a demanding quarter at work that I never asked what she left behind or who inherited it. I assumed my mother handled everything, the same way I assumed my money was paying for my father's medical care. I had spent a lifetime assuming the best about people who had never once earned that trust, and I called that assumption love, lying in that hospital bed, with my daughter 40 minutes away in a stranger's careful hands. I finally understood something. I hadn't been supporting my family. I had been funding a story about my family. The actual family was something else entirely. The actual family had just chosen a cat. Michael called again during his layover. This time, he told me exactly what my mother had said, word for word, because he knew I would want every word. He had called her at 9 o'clock. He explained that I was in surgery, that the baby needed someone, and he asked her to please drive the 20 minutes. She had sighed. Michael said, "That long." Theatrical sigh she always used. Then she told him she really couldn't. Ashley was finally getting her dream vacation, and someone had to watch the cat. Besides, Emily always landed on her feet. Then she said the line, "Your sister never has these emergencies." As if the truck that hit me had checked my family rank first. As if my daughter's first night without her mother could wait until a cruise was over. Michael's voice cracked as he told me, and I told him to breathe. I told him Lily was fine, that I was fine, that he needed to get on his plane. After we hung up, I opened Instagram, which I almost never do, and there was Ashley's story at the top, a glossy reel of a turquoise pool deck, a coconut drink, and a caption that read, "Living my best life finally." My sister was 29, an aspiring influencer with 11,000 followers, and a $500 monthly allowance she thought came from the universe. I didn't comment. I didn't scream into the dark. Instead, I opened my messages and typed 3 words to a contact I almost never used, a contact saved simply as Grandpa H. "We should talk." The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, like he had been waiting 9 years for that exact text. And maybe he had. I expected Grandpa Harold to write back. Instead, my phone lit up with a FaceTime call from the middle of the Caribbean Sea. It was Ashley. I answered with my left hand, my face half in shadow, and she didn't notice the hospital ceiling behind me, didn't notice the cast, didn't ask why I was lying down at midnight. "Emily, finally," she said, holding the phone too close, giving me a full view of her sunburned nose. My card got declined at the spa. It was, humiliating. I waited. She filled the silence the way she always did. "Mom said the family account always covers me. Did you touch something?" And there it was. The whole architecture of the lie in one sentence, the family account. My sister genuinely believed the $500 a month came from some communal Carter treasury, a magic well my mother managed. She had no idea it came from me, because my mother had spent 9 years making sure she never found out. I asked her evenly if she knew I had been in an accident. "Wait, what? Are you being dramatic right now?" Behind her, a steel drum band started playing. "Can you just fix the card? We dock in Cozumel tomorrow, and I have a shoot." A shoot. I told her I would look into it, which was true, and that I had to go, which was also true. I hung up before she could answer and lay there in the dark, with the steel drums still ringing in my ears. My sister wasn't cruel. Not exactly. She was something almost worse. She was a person who had never once been asked to imagine that the well had a bottom, because no one had ever let her see who was carrying the bucket. The next morning, they moved me to a regular room. That was when the family group text started buzzing on the tray table. I was in a chat called Carter Family, with a dozen relatives in it. Mostly silent, mostly aunts. I rarely opened it, but the screen kept flashing. Against my better judgment, I tapped in. My mother had been busy. She had posted a long message an hour earlier. It began, "I'm heartbroken to say Emily is being dramatic again, and has cut her struggling parents off out of spite. She wrote that my father's health was fragile, that they had given me everything, that she didn't know how she would cover his medicine now." Then she added, for the audience, "We've always managed on our own. But this is cruel." There it was again, the same lie glowing on a screen. Except this time, it wasn't my banking app. It was a stage. We manage on our own. That woman had said that sentence to relatives for 9 years while cashing my transfers on the 1st of every month. My Aunt Carol had already replied with 3 broken heart emojis and the words, "Shame on her," "Kicking a sick man when he's down," a cousin sent praying hands. Nobody in that chat knew the truth, because the truth had never been allowed in the room. I held the phone and felt the old reflex rise, the urge to explain myself, to soften it, to manage everyone's feelings, the way I had managed everything else. Instead, I set the phone face down. Explaining was the old me. The new me, the one the truck had apparently installed, wanted something colder, something more precise. The new me wanted the numbers in the room, and I knew exactly where to find them. Michael walked into my hospital room at 11 the next morning. He was unshaven, gray with exhaustion, carrying Lily in her car seat and a diaper bag over one shoulder. He had flown straight home, relieved Jennifer Brooks, and driven the baby to me. He set the car seat on the bed and just looked at me, at the cast, at the bruising along my jaw, his eyes filled. I told him not to, because if he started, I would too, and I had work to do. He lifted Lily out and laid her carefully on my chest, mindful of my ribs, for 1 minute. The three of us just breathed together. That is the only part of that week I would ever choose to live again. Then my phone rang. It was my father, Robert Carter, 64 years old, the man whose heart I had been funding for 9 years. His voice was thin and shaking. "Em," he said, using the name he hadn't used since I was little. I didn't know it got this bad. The money, the accident. I didn't know. For one suspended second, I believed he might do it, that he might finally stand up in his own house. "I never wanted you carrying all of it," he said. Then I heard him take a breath, like a man about to step off a ledge. But behind him, I heard my mother's voice, sharp, low, asking who he was talking to. The line went muffled. A hand covered the speaker. When he came back, his voice had changed, flattened, retreated. I should go, feel better. Then he hung up. That was my father in one phone call. A good man who had spent 40 years learning that the safest thing to do in that house was nothing at all. That afternoon, Michael brought me my laptop and propped it on the rolling table. Then I did the one thing in the world that has never failed to steady my hands. I built a spreadsheet. With my left hand and a great deal of patience, I logged into my bank account. I exported 9 years of statements and dropped them into a pivot table. This is what I do for a company worth billions. I could certainly do it for my own life. I sorted the $486,000 by where it had actually landed, and the picture that assembled itself, cell by cell, was not the picture my mother had painted for our relatives. The mortgage payments I thought I was covering had been made 10 times in 9 years, not 108 times. My father's documented medical expenses, the real ones. The cardiologist visits and prescriptions came to about $65,000 across the entire period. So where had the other $421,000 gone? I filtered by withdrawal location and date. A cluster lit up like a rash. Cash withdrawals. Hundreds of them. Almost all within a 2-mile radius of one zip code. I pulled up a map. The zip code was Black Hawk. My mother hadn't been visiting a casino on one unlucky night when she chose not to help her granddaughter. My mother had been visiting that casino for the better part of a decade, on my dime, while telling a dozen relatives she managed on her own. And then there was a second, smaller stream. It branched off and ran somewhere else entirely. Steady, deliberate, year after year. I followed it. It led to Ashley. I sat back as far as my ribs allowed and let the numbers speak, because numbers, unlike my family, had never once lied to me. I'm going to give you the exact numbers because I want you to hold them the way I held them. Everything after this turns on them. Out of $486,000, only $65,000 could be matched to my father's actual medical care. Only $11,000 had touched the mortgage. That left roughly $410,000 unaccounted for, and it split into 2 rivers. The first river, about $290,000 over 9 years, was cash withdrawn in small, respectable amounts near Black Hawk. Small enough that no single withdrawal would ever look like a problem. The second river ran to my sister, around $120,000. including that $40,000 line marked Loan M, a line that had been filed under my father's surgery to hide it inside the only category nobody questioned. A loan she had never been asked to repay. A sum that, as it turned out, had funded a year of brand building, a leased SUV, and a photographer in Tulum. I printed the summary on the unit's bedside printer. One clean sheet. The whole 9 years in 12 rows. Then Michael showed me one more thing. He had been scrolling through the relatives' chat and found a screenshot of a message my mother had sent to Aunt Carol ages ago. Long before any of this. In it, she bragged. We covered Ashley's brand ourselves. That's what good parents do. We covered it ourselves. I looked at that screenshot, then I looked at my one printed page, and something inside me went very quiet. Very level. I wasn't going to send an angry text. I wasn't going to explain or defend myself. I was going to let the paper enter the room in front of the same audience my mother had spent 9 years performing for, and then I was going to walk out and never fund the show again. It's handled, I said to Michael, and for the first time, those words felt less like triage and more like a verdict. I want to stop here for a second, because if you've made it this far, you might be the exact person I'm about to describe. I spent 9 years believing I was paying for my father's heart. In reality, I was paying for slot machines and brand photo shoots. If you've ever sent money based on trust alone, do one thing tonight. Pull up a bank statement. Just one. And read it as if it belongs to someone else, if this story is hitting close to home. Subscribe. Because the next part is where my grandfather walks through that hospital door, and what he told me from beside that bed changed everything I thought I knew about my mother. My mother discovered the transfers had stopped the same way she discovered everything, when it cost her. The first of the month arrived. No deposit appeared. By noon. My phone was lighting up with her name. I let it ring twice, the third time. I answered, because avoidance was the old me. Her voice came through warm as fresh pie, the voice she uses on relatives, on waiters, on strangers she wants something from. Honey, are you okay? We've been worried sick about you and that baby. Worried sick. The woman who chose a cat. I told her I was recovering. Thank you. There was a pause. I could practically hear her repositioning. Then the warmth slowly curdled into something far more familiar. I noticed the account didn't come through. Is there some kind of mix-up with the bank? I told her it wasn't a mix-up. Silence. Then, right on schedule, came the guilt. After everything your father and I did for you, we took you to every practice. We kept a roof over your head. I let her keep going. She always followed the same script. Eventually, she circled back to the weapon that had never failed her, and she said it again. Softer this time, almost wounded, as if I were the unreasonable one. You know, your sister never has these emergencies. There it was. The third time I had heard that sentence in 3 days. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I simply said, I know, Mom. And I let those words mean something she never intended. Ashley never had emergencies because Ashley had me. And now Ashley had a declined credit card and a leased SUV she couldn't afford. I told my mother I needed to feed the baby. Then I hung up while she was still talking. Something I had never done once in 34 years. When the mother fails, she sends the aunt. That afternoon, Aunt Carol texted me directly. in my entire adult life. She'd done that maybe twice, both times to ask for money for a fundraiser. Her message was a wall of borrowed outrage. I am disgusted. Your parents are barely getting by, and you cut them off while your father is sick. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Family takes care of family. I read it twice, and the line about my grandmother almost got me, because Margaret Sullivan was the one person in that family I never wanted to disappoint. Then I remembered her actual words. Somebody has to watch this family's money, and your mother won't. And suddenly I understood that Carol had it exactly backward. So I didn't send a paragraph. I didn't defend myself. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. Instead, I attached a single page, the page with 12 rows and 9 years of numbers. Then I typed one sentence beneath it. Here's where the money your sister-in-law says she manages on her own actually went. The Blackhawk withdrawals are hers. Ask her. Then I put the phone down and changed Lily's diaper one-handed. With a calm I hadn't felt in a decade, the phone buzzed once. I saw the typing bubbles from Carol. Then they disappeared. Then nothing. No reply, not that hour, not that day. I imagined her sitting in her kitchen staring at 12 rows of numbers she couldn't argue with. Because that's the thing about a spreadsheet. You can call a person dramatic, you can call them selfish, you can call them ungrateful. But you cannot call a column of withdrawals dramatic. It simply sits there, being true. I had spent my entire life managing this family's feelings. It had never occurred to me that the kindest and hardest thing I could do was hand them a fact and let them sit with it alone. My mother is many things, but she is never out of moves. When the warmth failed, and the aunt failed, she reached for the one stage she controlled completely. She called a family dinner. The invitation arrived as a group text in the Carter family chat. It was written in her best wounded matriarch voice. Let's all gather Sunday to welcome baby Lily and clear the air as a family. Emily, I hope you'll come so we can put this misunderstanding behind us. A misunderstanding. 5 days after choosing a cat over my newborn daughter, it was a misunderstanding. Michael read the message over my shoulder. You don't have to go, he said. We can stay home with Lily and let them sit with this. And he was right. I didn't have to go. But I knew exactly what Sunday was really about. It wasn't about welcoming my daughter. It was about getting me into a room full of relatives. A room where they could pressure me into turning the money back on. A room where they could perform reconciliation until I caved, the way I always had. My mother wanted an audience for my surrender, so I decided to give her the audience. Just not the surrender. I texted back 2 words. We'll come. And I felt the trap close around the trapper. Then I made one more call to Grandpa Harold. We talked for 40 minutes. At the very end, he asked me a single question. His voice was dry and gravelly. You want it quiet, or you want it true? I looked down at Lily sleeping in the crook of my good arm, at the tiny life I had nearly missed while funding a lie. True, I said. Then I'll bring the folder. I didn't ask what was inside it. Some part of me already knew. Whatever was in that folder would end this once and for all. But I need to back up a few hours. To the moment the title promised you. Because it happened before the dinner. And it's the hinge this entire story swings on. 3 hours after I canceled those transfers. The night of the accident. While Michael was still in the air. My hospital room door opened slowly, and my grandfather walked in. Harold, 78 years old, my mother's father. He wore a pressed flannel shirt, buttoned all the way to the collar. He moved carefully with a cane he clearly resented needing. I hadn't told him which hospital I was in. He called every major hospital in the area until he found me, under his free arm. He carried a thick manila folder. The corners were worn soft with age. 2 brittle rubber bands crossed over the top. He set it down at the foot of my bed, like a man laying down something heavy he had carried for a very long time. Then he looked at me, at the cast, at the bruises. His jaw tightened. "Your mother told me you'd had a fender bender," he said. I drove past 3 exits before I realized I didn't believe her. Then he sat in the vinyl chair beside my bed, folded his weathered hands over the top of his cane, and said something I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. I knew. I always knew. I asked him what he meant. He looked at the folder, not at me. About the money, all 9 years of it. He paused. About where your mother has been spending her afternoons. Another pause. About what she told this family while you bled yourself dry. He tapped the folder once. Not tonight, though. His voice softened. You've got enough tonight. Then he tapped it again. We'll do this properly, in front of everyone where she can't slip out the side door. And he was right. Some truths only count when they're spoken in a full room. Before he left that night, Harold gave me one piece of the story, just enough so I wouldn't walk into Sunday blind. He told me about Margaret Sullivan, his wife of 51 years, my grandmother. She hadn't simply slipped away peacefully the way I had been told. In her final year, she had become suspicious. She noticed my mother's spending, the new car, the casino trips, the growing list of things that never seemed to match the story being told. And she started asking questions. Quiet questions, dangerous questions. One evening, she cornered Harold and said, "Somebody is keeping Linda afloat, and it isn't us. Find out who." It took him time. He was older, and the bank wasn't eager to talk. But Harold had spent 40 years managing the books of a cattle operation. He knew how to follow numbers. Eventually, the trail led to me. 9 years of a granddaughter quietly wiring away her financial future, pouring money into a hole her mother kept digging deeper. Your grandmother wanted to fix it before she died, Harold told me. He looked down at the folder. She ran out of time. Then he gave me a sad smile. So she did the next best thing. He wouldn't tell me more than that. Not yet. But Harold told me that Margaret Sullivan had spent her final clear months working with an attorney. Whatever she had set in motion carried both her signature and his, and according to a lawyer in Boulder, it was built to hold. In this state, Harold said, a trust like the one Margaret and I created can be structured exactly the way we structured it, and it does exactly what we told it to do. Then he stood. He tucked the folder back under his arm and paused at the door. She wasn't ashamed of you, Emily. His voice softened. Whatever your mother says on Sunday, your grandmother trusted you with everything. A pause. That's why she chose you. Then he was gone, and I didn't sleep at all that night, the day before the dinner. Harold stopped by the house to check on me. That's when I finally asked the question that had haunted me most of my life. Why Ashley? Why had my mother spent 30 years treating one daughter like a prize and the other like a utility? Harold sat quietly for a long moment, turning his coffee cup between his hands. "You have to understand how Margaret raised your mother," he said, and I immediately braced myself. I loved Margaret. I didn't want her story complicated. "Margaret was a hard woman," Harold continued. "Fair, mostly, but hard." He looked down into his coffee. "And she had a favorite. It wasn't your mother. It was your Uncle Danny. God rest him." I felt the floor shift beneath me because I knew exactly what role that left for my mother. I had lived it myself. Linda grew up being the one who handled everything while Danny got the affection. He sighed. "So when she had you, and you turned out steady, quiet, and capable just like she'd had to be, something in her couldn't stand it." Then he looked directly at me. "And when Ashley came along, loud, needy, and bright, Linda finally got her chance. A chance to be the mother of the favorite instead of the forgotten one. A chance to do for Ashley what nobody had done for her." He set down the cup. "It's not an excuse. It's just the shape of it." I sat with that for a while. My mother wasn't a cartoon villain. She wasn't twisting her mustache and plotting in the dark. She was a woman who had once been the overlooked load-bearing wall in her own mother's house. And instead of breaking the pattern, she handed it to me, then crowned my sister in her own image. "The casino," Harold said, "is the only place she ever felt like she might win something she didn't have to earn by being useful." And the worst part was, I understood her completely, and I was still done. That night, I decided exactly what Sunday would be, and what it wouldn't. It would not be a screaming match. I had watched my mother win 1,000 screaming matches. She was a virtuoso of volume. The moment I raised my voice, I would hand her exactly what she wanted, the role of the hysterical, ungrateful daughter, with a dozen witnesses ready to confirm it. So I wouldn't give her noise, I would give her paper. And I want you to notice the asymmetry, because it's the entire key to what happened next. My mother's weapons were words, warm lies, scheduled guilt, stories performed for relatives. My weapons were different. A single printed page, a screenshot on my husband's phone, and a folder in my grandfather's careful hands. She would shout, I would set down documents, she would perform. I would let facts be witnessed. She traded in feelings. I would answer in evidence, in front of the exact audience she had assembled to shame me. I explained the plan to Michael while we stood in the kitchen and Lily slept nearby. "I'm not going to argue with her," I said. "I'm going to show up, put it on the table, and let the paper talk." Michael studied me. "You sure you can stay calm knowing her?" I thought about every dinner I'd swallowed, every check I'd written, every time I'd managed my mother's emotions instead of speaking a simple truth. "I've been calm my whole life," I said. Then I smiled. "I just stopped being silent." Those are different things, and it had taken a truck, a cast, and a grandfather carrying a folder to teach me that difference. I slipped the printed page into Lily's diaper bag beneath the wipes, the last place anyone would think to look. Ashley flew home from the cruise on Saturday. She called me from the airport, and the call told me everything I needed to know about how little her world had changed, while mine had been rebuilt from the studs. "Okay, so the cruise was kind of ruined," she announced. No hello, no are you okay, no mention of the accident. I spent the whole trip stressed about my card. Do you know how embarrassing it is to get declined in front of people? I looked down at Lily and said nothing. Ashley took that as permission to continue. Mom said you had some kind of meltdown and stopped the family money. A pause. Which, fine. Have your feelings. But I have a launch coming up, and I literally cannot function without that account. Another pause. So can you just fix it before dinner tomorrow so we don't have to make a whole thing out of it? Fix it before dinner. As though my near-death experience and my newborn daughter's abandonment were nothing more than a clogged drain disrupting her content schedule. I asked her one quiet question. Ashley, where do you think that money comes from? Silence. A real silence. The first one I had ever heard from her. From Mom and Dad, she said, but her voice lifted slightly at the end. A question disguised as an answer. The first crack of doubt I had ever heard. It's a family thing. I told her I'd see her tomorrow. Then I let her sit with the question, because some bills have to be read personally before people believe them. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to discover who had been signing her life for 9 years. In a dining room full of relatives, with no card left to decline, and no story left to hide behind. Sunday arrived. We drove to my parents' house, the same house whose mortgage I believed I had been helping pay. I sat in the driveway for a moment, gathering myself. The cast was still on my arm and around my wrist. The hospital ID band remained. 5 days old. Soft gray. Worn. I had kept it intentionally before getting out of the car. I peeled it off and slipped it into my coat pocket. I wanted it with me. A small piece of proof. A reminder of exactly where I had been the night my mother chose a cat. Michael carried Lily's car seat. Behind us came the careful tap of a cane. Harold. His Sunday flannel pressed neatly, the worn manila folder tucked beneath his arm. He had insisted on arriving separately. He didn't want my mother to see us coming together and prepare herself. You ready? He asked quietly, through the front window. I could see everyone assembled. Aunt Carol, 2 cousins, my father in his chair, my mother moving through the room topping off coffee, playing wounded hostess, queen of a kingdom I had financed without ever being crowned in it. Ashley sat on the arm of the couch, scrolling her phone, sunburned, oblivious. I'm ready, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. Harold pushed the door open with the head of his cane, and the 3 of us walked inside. 3 generations my mother least wanted standing together, carrying a baby, a cast, a hospital bracelet, and a folder. The conversation died immediately. My mother turned, coffee pot in hand, smile already in place, and the evening began. My mother is, I'll give her this, an extraordinary performer. And she opened strong. She set down the coffee pot, pressed a hand dramatically against her chest, and crossed the room toward Lily with tears already forming. Oh, there's my grandbaby. She reached. Michael gently angled the carrier away, firm, polite, unmovable. The reach became a flutter. Then Act 1 began. My mother turned toward the relatives. Not toward me, toward the audience. I am just so relieved we're all here, she said, voice trembling perfectly, because this has been the hardest week of my life, her life. The week I spent in a hospital bed had somehow become the hardest week of hers. She explained that her daughter had suffered a little accident, thank goodness, and had used it as an excuse to abandon her struggling parents. to punish them over some imagined grievance. She dabbed at her eyes. Aunt Carol nodded automatically, though I noticed she wouldn't quite look at me. My 12 rows of numbers were still living somewhere in her head. My father stared at his hands. Ashley looked up from her phone, confused, sensing the script had a role for her she hadn't rehearsed. Then, my mother delivered the line that had worked for 30 years, the line that always won the room. She turned toward me, eyes wet, voice perfectly pitched. "I don't understand where this cruelty comes from." Then she said it, again. "Your sister never has these emergencies." The fourth time, the same sentence, the same weapon, the same excuse she had used when she left my newborn daughter alone. And she had absolutely no idea she had just handed me everything I needed. The room waited. They expected tears, or shouting, or collapse. I gave them none of those things. Instead, I reached into Lily's diaper bag, beneath the wipes, and removed a single folded sheet of paper.